the Sustainable Development Goals are global. They apply to every country, to every business, to every person. And another key difference is that the Millennium Development Goals were focusing only on a subset of issues. And for instance, they were not integrating environmental issues, whereas the SDGs do integrate environmental issues. And another difference between the Millennium Development Goals and the Sustainable Development Goals is that there are so many more of them. And that's a headache, because then it's like, what do you do with such an agenda with so many goals? And what I wanted to share with you is that there is a rationale around these goals, even if they are so numerous. The rationale is the following. These goals are considering the fact that we have some environmental and planetary constraints in which we operate as a business or as any type of organization. We have societal needs that are required for every human being to thrive. And then we have an economic model that can have different characteristics. And if you look at these three buckets, you can see that the 17 SDGs can be clustered around these three big groups, meaning that they are a global framework that considers all the societal needs that need to be delivered in a context where we have to consider as well planetary boundaries, with an economic model that is circular and is also sustainable. And the final aspect, the goal 17, is dealing with the partnerships required to achieve all the goals, because no one can go it alone. Okay, so I just wanted to show this, and that was developed by Johan Rockström and Pavan Sukhdev to try and give a little bit of a clearer story about this framework. So we have here a group of goals that have a deadline of 2030, and they basically constitute an agenda for the future. If we are to reach these goals by 2030, the world will be a better place for humans, for businesses, and for the planet. And that's what's very interesting as well, is that it is a set. It's really to be considered as a set and not as a menu, right? When you think about the Sustainable Development Goals and what you should do or connect to them, you cannot just cherry pick those, some, and not consider the others, because it's really the system that defines a better world. So that system approach is something else that characterizes these goals. So as I was saying, these goals have been defined within the UN system, and they've been signed by governments. So the first question that comes to mind is, why should business care, right? And the reason why business should care is manifold. The first one is that we need business to be able to deliver on the goal. If business is not involved and doesn't contribute to delivering on them, they will not be achieved. They are very ambitious goals that requires that everybody chip in. There's also included businesses in the design to make sure that they would also speak to that community. And finally, what we've seen is that that agenda has really been captured by businesses and is still being used as the universal language to report the contribution to the common good for businesses, right? They are really a way for businesses to be able to report the contribution that they make to society at the impact level. So earlier this week, there was a big gathering of the UN Global Compact at the UN. It was virtual as well. And it's really about companies engaged around the UN. And what you see is that as of today, 92% of businesses think that sustainability is important, and integrating sustainability in the business model is fundamental. 48% of them say that they're partly doing it, but only 23% of business say that they're doing enough to be able to reach the goals, okay? So what I want to illustrate here is that this is this agenda, this framework, which is global, which has clear goals to 2030, has been adopted by every nation in the world and is increasingly being considered by business to report in terms of the good that they do. So when we talk talk about business as a force for good, what we are talking about is business making an intentional contribution to societal progress, i.e. businesses intentionally integrating the SDGs in their value chain creation. And one of your questions when we were preparing that, that session, Wingee, was, what does that mean when we talk about this, embeddedness, this embed impact? A quick way to say how whatever we do relates to the SDG could be to just, pick those which top header makes sense to what we think we're doing. Now, these 17 goals are accompanied by 169 very specific targets. That is the level at which you should look at how your business is connected to the framework to really identify how you contribute. And here I'm putting an illustration about how you look at your full value chain and the impact it has on these SDGs in terms of negative contribution, of positive contribution. And having an embedded impact is having considered SDGs and how this whole value chain connect to that agenda. And this is a quite tedious exercise to do, but that's what is meant. If this is not done in that manner, then the only connection of an organization to the SDGs is only at the level of the rhetoric, right? It can also be at a level of unintentional consequences. For instance, you create a business, you generate jobs, and you can say that you contribute to specific SDGs, like for instance, SDG 8. But here, this is not what we're talking about. When we're talking about embedded impact, we are talking about an intentionality to design a value chain that will contribute, right? If you are in a certain business and you are supplying certain products, how are these products being supplied? What is the impact in terms of labor rights that you generate by choosing your suppliers? What is the ecological footprint of the inputs you bring in that supply chain, etc.? So when we talk about embedded impact, the way the Cartier initiative is mentioning it, it's about looking at this connection to the SDG framework and the intentionality of your organization towards the goals. Here I wanted to also illustrate the interconnectedness of the system and of the set of the goals, and the reason why you cannot just cherry pick and take one. If you will take an action or have a business that tends to contribute to gender equality, obviously you will contribute to SDG 5 on gender equality, but the way that business is also delivered could touch upon dimension of SDG 1, 4, 8, and 10, which also have a gender dimension to them, right? So the idea again about the framework is to make sure you consider everything that you can have an impact on and not just a subset. And here I put some reference for you to see where this is impact so that you can, if you want to go and look at how that works, you can do it afterwards. I'll be leaving the slides with the participants. Now the question is like, oh my God, 17 goals, 169 targets, where do I start? How do I fit in that? That sounds extremely complex. So there are tools that can help you. We have here, and I put the links, you have the SDG Compass that really explain what is the roadmap of looking at how your business connects with the SDG framework, right? Starts by understanding the SDGs, that's what we're doing now. Then defining your priorities based on what matters for your organization. Obviously, depending on the focus of your organization, some SDGs would be more material than others. So that is something you first need to take into account. So, and that will what will guide you then identify certain priorities. Based on these priorities, you will be setting goals, and that will help you then integrate, as I was just showing, in your value chain, different activities that will connect to the broader framework. a key part of the next steps has to do with reporting and communicating around the goals, and then going back on a regular basis around it. So you will find the step-by-step approach in such a document. There are others, but I'm sticking to the UN things so that you have these illustrations, but that's what needs to happen. Very concretely, what you also have is that you have tools that are management tools that help you really play around with what that means for your business. This tool, the SDG Action Manager, is a free tool. It's online, so I'll encourage you to just click on the link. What you do there is that you respond to a number of questions about your own organization or business, I mean, whatever the type of business you have, and it has pre-recorded some SDGs that will be directly connected to how you specify what your business look like, right? So you do that, it gives you a set of initial goals. So it helps you find your starting point that you can tweak, but at least it gives you something that you can start with. It helps then define a baseline, and it helps them look at some of the activities you can take to move your intentional action throughout your value chain to a certain level of engagement. So again, that's not a reporting tool, it's really a management tool. And what I put here at the bottom of right here is an illustration of the kind of dashboard that you can keep an eye on based on the priorities you've defined for yourself and the actions that you've put forth in your roadmap. So all the words I'm using now might be a little bit general, and that's intentionally so, because we'll have a very concrete example after. But I wanted to show that there are some tools that can help you play around a way that you can really consider your full contribution to that agenda. And then a regular question that we have to is that, I'm a single entrepreneur, or I'm a tiny SME. I mean, should I be considering this goal? And the answer is yes, because number one, there is no small contribution. Number two, again, this is increasingly becoming the universal language for reporting impact at the end of the day. And you want to have that language because then you can show how your contribution connect to the greater good. And then also in terms of communication, this is important. And finally, there are a large number of coalitions that are forming, coalitions of business, but coalition of different stakeholder groups that are forming to join forces. And that will also help you articulate and find what other organization you can join to amplify your impact through partnership. So what I wanted to say is, just to be clear that the SDG framework, as complex as it is really reflective of the fact that we need to adopt a systems approach to whatever we do these days, because this is the world we're living in. The world is complex, so of course the framework is complex, but it's really not, to be used as just a PR tool and, cut and paste several goals and plug them there. But there are tools that can help you do a full exercise that can really help you connect to the broader agenda. I'm going to pause here, Wingee, and tell me if I should say anything else. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Katell. That was a terrific overview of the SDG goal and how that applies to entrepreneurship. I think maybe now we can move on to Caitlin and have Caitlin share a bit about how she has applied the UN SDG goal and how she has been measuring social and environmental impact in her company. And then in the end, we can take maybe the questions from the audience, because I know there is building up now a few questions for all of us. So, but maybe before we move on to the question, let's move on to Caitlin so she can share with us how she has utilized UN SDG goals and how she measures impact in her company.
So I am calling in from Nairobi, Kenya. I was a 2019 Cartier fellow, and so I'm super excited to be back connected to them and hopefully welcoming the next class of entrepreneurs. So I'm based in Nairobi, Kenya, and I run a company called Flair. And we are building 911 services in cities and countries where it doesn't exist. It's as simple and as complex as it sounds. The reality is that the majority of the world does not have a 911 number. So if you're calling in from Europe or the US, you're pretty lucky because the majority of the world throughout Asia, throughout Africa, even in parts of South America, don't have a centralized way to get help. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about our business so you just have a bit of context before we jump into how we apply SDGs. So from the beginning, I mean, we were very intentional about how we set up our company, and it is a socially driven company. It isn't a byproduct of what we do. It was very much born out of the fact that if you do not have fast emergency services, you are 10 times more likely to die. So that means if you're in a road accident, that means if you have a cardiac emergency, if you're a woman who goes into labor, the consequence of not having an emergency system means that you have so many more lives that are lost as a result of that. And having lived in Kenya for over a decade, I saw that firsthand and knew that, you know, having grown up, I'm originally from Chicago, having grown up in Chicago, 911 was a number that I knew from the age of 3. And so living in a city in a country where that system or infrastructure didn't exist seemed not only wrong, but also something totally possible to fix. And the reason that there was no 911 is that, you know, there's a kind of similar, people oftentimes call us the Uber for ambulances. Similar to Uber, there is a lot of fragmentation in the market. So there's plenty of ambulances, but there is no actual central resource. So today, what we do is that we have brought together all of the available ambulances that exist in the country under one single system, leveraging technology. We do this by building partnerships with all of the hospitals and ambulances that do already exist. And we offer a affordable product. So one of the elements that we had to consider is that how do people, even if you make something accessible, how do you also ensure that someone can afford that service? So we sell a microinsurance product to ensure that if you do have an emergency, you're never, you know, paying out of pocket, and it's never too expensive to deny access. So today in Kenya, we operate the largest network of ambulances. We've brought response times. It used to be 3 hours down to minutes. We're as fast as London, which we're super proud to be able to compete with a city like that, because most people think that Nairobi is just traffic filled and there's no way that you would be able to get an ambulance. So that's a little bit about us and who we are and what we're doing. And we're on a mission to replicate what we've done in Kenya across the continent as well, where the majority of the continent does not have 911. So when we look at SDGs, exactly what Katell said is that you have to look through the entire kind of supply chain or the entire process. You can see here, at first you're like, oh my gosh, you fulfill so many SDGs. But I think that that is part of the point of SDGs, is that they need to be embedded in kind of every single aspect of your business. So I think one of the things that we did when we started the business, of course, intentionally, we're doing a socially driven business, but we also tried to understand what were all the ways that we impact our users. So of course we impact users, meaning patients. So if someone has an emergency, there's impact at that level because you are giving them the peace of mind. You also are saving their life. But we're also impacting, you know, the ambulances or the hospitals or those that we partner with on the kind of supply side to ensure that those services are delivered. And that feeds into, you know, ensuring that people have decent work and that they're compensated and recognized for the work that they're doing, which is life-saving. And there's so many other kind of ways that we think about kind of impact as well. We operate mainly in cities. And so again, as Africa urbanizes more and more and more, infrastructure becomes such an important, you know, piece of being able to advance a city and a country as well. So I won't go through all of them, but you can see, and I'm happy to share the slides afterwards, just so you can see how we apply the various SDGs, and we're able to kind of see across the entire ecosystem how we impact kind of our users and customers. I would say that as you're thinking about probably applying to Cartier is to really also adjust for the audience. I mean, I think a lot of times when we're thinking about our impact, it's not like we're cherry picking, but also there is too much here to like ever put down that, you know, 8 SDGs and go through it in extreme detail. So I will, for the sake of this, go through one of our SDGs that we really focus on, which is good health and well-being, to show the example of that. And lastly, just make sure if you're going to say that you're you're actually working towards the SDGs, that you can measure it and you can prove it. Otherwise, it's probably not clearly enough like aligned with your business. So one way that we measure impacts on the SDG is through stories. And of course, everyone loves like data, and we do use data, but we focus in 0 M, because health and well-being is really everything. It could be preventative in a way that we do that. And I picked out a very specific example. During COVID here in Kenya, we have a curfew. And during the curfew, which goes from every night from 7 p.m. to 5 a.m., you can't leave your house. And so one of the effects that we've seen during COVID is that women are unable to get to the hospital to deliver. There's 2,500 women across the country that deliver every single night. And if they don't have a way to get to the hospital, how are you going to ensure safe delivery? And so this is a very kind of relevant, specific example, but we like to use that because it really makes it seem so concrete and easy to understand, is that the impact that we have had is that, you know, we've responded to over 5,000 calls since the curfew began. We've successfully saved 100% of women. Normally, the ratio of women actually dying during childbirth here is actually quite high. So we also show kind of what the baseline is to be able to show that progress. So that is one way that we kind of measure our impact, is like through stories and specific examples, and try to be as clear as possible, such that oftentimes when someone's evaluating or looking at your company, they're not going to know all the ins and outs and the jargon. And so just trying to make sure that they can really relate to the business as well and see that impact firsthand. The second is more kind of traditional, is like through metrics, is that for us, your chance of survival during an emergency is all about time. Is the faster you get care, is the lower the chance that you die. And it's as simple and terrible as that. And so when we began the business, we looked at how long it took to find an ambulance. How long did it take that ambulance to get to the scene? And how long did it take you to finally get to a hospital to be seen by a physician? And you can see that adds up to about 3 hours, which is nuts, because it just, as an example, if you have a heart attack, you have 8 minutes. So 8 minutes versus 3 hours, there's no way that you would have survived. And so this is a way that we, at a business level, look at how are we kind of working towards achieving improved health and well-being, is through the actual kind of operational metrics of the business, meaning how fast are we with getting an ambulance dispatched, how fast are we getting to the scene of an accident, how fast are we getting to the hospital and getting that patient delivered. So that's more at a kind of a company level, how we apply that as well. And I guess that I've just picked out health and well-being, but for each of the SDGs, this is definitely the one that's like most prominent in the business, but for all of them, you know, there are ways that we measure and kind of look at a business level. And so I'll stop there, and hopefully that answered all the questions, Wingee, that you wanted me to talk through.
Oh, that is terrific. Thank you so much, Caitlin. Yeah, I think your business and how you have approached it and how you have built it over time really sort of is a great reflection of the model impact entrepreneurs for us. So thank you for sharing all of that. And so maybe with that, I'm going to head over to the Q&As that people have shared, and then I will see if maybe Katell and Caitlin and myself can help answer some of this. So here we go. So let me just scroll through the questions. So here's the first question we have. What is the best method to use when wanting to be more intentional about being SDG centric or aligned? Start first with the SDG and build around them, or map the appropriate SDG around your key pillars or tenet as a business? This is a great question from Lolo from Botswana. Katell, maybe you can help us with this question?
Yeah, thanks. And thanks, Lolo, for a great question. I think it depends probably on where you are with your venture. Say if you haven't started yet, because we do that with our students in the curriculum in INSEAD through what's called an SDG bootcamp, right? I mean, students don't have their venture yet, so we start by having a session on all the SDGs and see what resonates with them. So we start from the framework, see what resonates with them, and then they develop a venture that will contribute to certain SDGs, right? So that's one way, if you haven't started, to see what triggers your motivation and what's dear to you, because often social entrepreneurship, I mean, not often, it's always extremely personal, and Caitlin can talk about this much more than anybody here in the room, I'm assuming. Now, if you already have your business, then you have to start from your business, right? And as I said, mapping the whole value chain creation of your business against the SDGs. And depending on what your business is, some will be more relevant than others. Take INSEAD, for instance, and what I'm trying to do in that organization. It's not a business, but it is an educational organization. Obviously, for us, every part of SDGs connected to education will be directly connected to our value chain, right? And maybe life underwater would be less so. Okay, so that's the way to go, and that's what I say when I say consider the whole value chain. Now, you could think that the life underwater doesn't matter to INSEAD, and yet when we look at our operations and when we're going to look at our environmental footprint, and when we decide to remove all plastic bottles from the millions of people coming through our campus, then yes, we can contribute to reducing waste and to impacting life underwater at the end of the day. Not something we would have thought so when we look originally at an educational institution. Yes, so it might not be core, but we might decide to prioritize as part of the things we want to do through our value chain. I hope that answers the question.
Great, thank you so much, Katell. The next question we have, I think this one's probably best for Caitlin. We have a question from, I think it's Tamina Day. How have you raised private capital for your business? And if yes, how did your investor respond to the SDG-driven business model?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So we took a pretty traditional path to raising capital in the sense that early on it was a lot of competitions or grants or accelerators, but subsequently have raised a number of rounds of funding. A seed round, we're raising our Series A right now. I would say the world has definitely changed in the last decade to help us actually fund businesses that are socially driven. So the majority of our investors are what you call impact investors. And so they are explicitly looking to invest in businesses that have an impact, and SDG is no better way to show that impact. And so I think that part of raising money is also finding investors who align with your vision, such that that does not also create conflicts down the line as well. And by having impact does not mean that they don't care about you making money. That's not it at all, actually. It's, they want to make sure that you're sustainable and able to scale as well, and commercially viable. But I think a lot of it is also making sure that you have the right set of investors.
Great, terrific. Thank you, Caitlin. This was another question that it's best probably for Katell. Katell, we have a question from Lynn Becker, and she was wondering whether you can please explain through an example of cherry picking, and maybe just maybe as some context also. In the application form, actually, to the Cartier Women Initiative, we do ask you to sort of identify the top 3 SDG goals that you're addressing, and so perhaps maybe also think a bit about that. But maybe Katell, can you share some of your thoughts around sort of, I guess, what Lynn is asking around this idea of cherry picking? I think she was referring to when you mentioned about sort of which SDG goal to feature.
Yeah, so yeah, I'll speak in general terms because I don't have the details about the actual application. When I mean cherry picking, I mean putting forward some part of the impact you have only, and not considering the overall impact. And that's what's interesting. That's why it is a little bit daunting framework. It is because it covered everything, and it is to make sure that you've thought through every possible implication, positive and negative, you can have. I'm going to take a very concrete example. We just had a great presentation from what Caitlin is doing in Kenya, and obviously one of the top SDGs that her work is contributing to is SDG 3. And then she showed us that there were many others. Now, if say, and that's not the case, such a company has decided to not pay its employee with decent wage and or not provide them with I don't know, health package, and decide not to report on that, that will be cherry picking, right? Because it's doing good with one hand, but not considering baseline minimum of societal contribution with the other one. So that's what I mean. I mean really thinking about your whole value chain and making sure that you've thought through all the impacts you have, positively and negatively, and then intentionally deciding of what you think is a priority.
Great, fantastic. Thank you so much, Katell. Oh, the next question we have is from Tanya Muleza. Hopefully that is at least a little bit close to Tanya's last name of how it should be pronounced. Tanya's question is, how does an applicant prove the alignment with SDG if we can provide her with some examples? Caitlin, maybe you'd be best placed to answer this question because you are a fellow that had very strong measurement in your SDG goals and how you have gone about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I can't remember the application exactly, but I do think, I guess some tips generally is to, when you write the application, recognize the person reading it is not going to know anything about your business. And so to use as many specific examples as possible. So oftentimes we use, even if it's one woman or one person, to kind of show how that individual benefits from our service and our product. From there, then extrapolate that out to say what your overall impact is. And so really try to make sure that it's understandable to someone who's reading it from the outside. And I'm guessing most of you have, a social bend to the businesses that you're creating. So it actually won't be as challenging as maybe it sounds like it might be right now.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, thank you, Caitlin. And maybe just to add on to that, I think, a few ways of really sort of reflecting impact is one of your goals of your business and sort of what you're trying to achieve is also in your sharing with us your KPIs for the business, right? I think if the impact goals are parts of your KPI in how you measure success and progress and milestone for your business, that also shows that you are someone who is diligently measuring and trying to figure out rather your business is really creating the social and environmental change that you want to see in the world. And ultimately, I think at the Cartier Women Initiative, especially since we're a program for early stage businesses, we're not expecting your impact measurements to be perfect. But more importantly is that the intent of your business is really geared towards creating social and environmental change. And also that you have made the effort to at least try to measure it. And even if you're not measuring it perfectly or you're measuring it perhaps in a more crude way, certainly that's acceptable. We're really just trying to understand if you're really, if at the heart of your business is to create the change you want to see in the world. So with that, we have a question from Amanda C. And Amanda's question is that she is a sustainable reporting consultant in Houston, Texas. And they have clients expressing interest in reporting to the SDG. And while she wants to help them, she's concerned that some companies are seeing SDG as a reporting framework rather than what they are. How would you answer this, Pottery? And particularly when the company is in a high impact, in terms of negative impact, industry. Katell, might you have some thoughts to share on this subject?
It's a very convoluted and politically correct question. Thank you, Amanda. Yes, again, I mean, the SDGs is what it is. It's a framework. It's a framework. It's a universal framework. So that every organization can speak the same language. This is what it is. It is not a reporting tool. There exist a number of reporting tools, and I'm sure that Amanda could speak to that. And so what we're discussing here today is, number one, making sure that you're aware of that framework. And again, I've shared some tools that can help you as there are management tools that can help you. Sorry, I'm so excited to be here. I'm like shaking my laptop like crazy. Sorry about that. So with the tools I've shared are management tools that help you basically put your business in that context. That's all it is. It's only a framework. It's not a reporting tool. Now, On the reporting front, what we're seeing are many trends, and probably Amanda could be best placed to talk about that. There are many reporting frameworks and tools. At INSEAD, for our own sustainability report, for instance, we're using the GRI reporting systems, and they are now also connecting to the SDGs the same way, so that even when you report, you can make that extra connection, right? So even reporting tools, reporting agency, and I'm sure like yourself, Amanda, reporting professionals and consultants are not using that. And yes, again, I mean, I think for what you're pointing to, I think what's very important, again, is not to enter into tick-boxing exercise and to use that framework, you know, with a nice collage on the front of a brochure to show what you have random connections to. I mean, that's problematic, and that's part of what we're seeing sometimes with green or impact washing, etc. So that's probably what Amanda was referring to. So for reporting, there are some proper tools. So make sure that you use, you know, proper tools, and yeah, I'm going to leave it at that.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Katell. We have coming up with lots of questions here. How can a social enterprise join any structured coalition that can enable their impact to be measured? And is there a site on office that's responsible for this? And this is a question from Chinny Yenwa. And perhaps, Caitlin, are you part of any coalition or any industry organization that sort of looks at UN SDG goals as well?
I am not, unfortunately.
Okay, and maybe Katell, might you have any suggestions for this woman in regards to sort of her question, to sort of stay connected with the UN SDG goals?
So I'm not aware of that, but there are fora where you can engage in conversation. As I mentioned now, the UN Global Compact will be a good place to check. So the tools that I'm mentioning, I shared today, are on their platform. So that's the place where you will be able to find some other businesses. Typically, those registered with the UN Global Compact will be probably larger type of organizations. But that's probably where you can try and find if you have any gathering or clustering through particular industries.
Fantastic. Here's a question from Gomo Lemo. Is there a framework or a template that one could start working on in preparing to pitch for stakeholder engagement outside of a value chain canvas model or business model canvas? And she's supposedly looking for value chain methodology and its ability to be sustainable. Caitlin, did you ever come across resources that's a bit that's in this vein, sort of a business model canvas, but maybe for specifically social impact in companies?
You know, I think that you can use the same, you know, models that startups generally use, like the lean canvas model or others like that. I guess the key is that social businesses are not different in the sense inherently. I mean, they shouldn't be, it's a business, but the way that you think about impact is really front and center. So I would just use all of the standard tools that, whether it's Harvard or MIT or INSEAD or any of the top business schools, will have plenty of resources to fill out.
Yes, yeah, that's terrific. Yes, we within the Cartier Women Initiative, as part of our fellowship program, we certainly also use the business model canvas, and like Caitlin explained, it's really no different for a social impact businesses, and what you'll see is that peppered within all the phases of the preparation for the business model, you'll see impact as very inherent in all the items. And specifically, for example, value proposition as what the social impact and environmental impact is part of the value proposition of the company. But yeah, so terrific. Here we have a question from one of the anonymous attendees. Is there a way to identify how my initiative relates to the SDGs? Katell, I think you shared a resource
Yeah.
in your presentation. Yeah, maybe.
Exactly. I think, I just put one there, which I think is nicely done, honestly. And it's free, because there was a
Yeah.
question also. I was looking, it's free, zero money. So it's called the SDG Action Manager. And you can just go there and play around with it. And I think that's the best way also to figure out what's material or not for your company. So I just suggest you use that. For a small company, I know that to fill in the full thing, it takes a couple of hours, is what I've heard. It becomes much more complex and time consuming when you have a large business with suppliers and companies all over the world, which I don't think is the case of the applicants here. So go ahead and play around with it. I think would be my best suggestion. That's the best way to learn. And it's so specific to every particular venture that you have to experience it, and that's a good way of learning. And together with the tool, you have also learning modules on the SDG Action Manager. It's quite nicely done. And I'm not here to do a PR for it, because I have no interest in doing that, but I think it's a good model, because the more a company use it, the more it can use the data to benchmark. So that can also give you an idea of what others are doing in your particular industry.
So here we now have a question also from an anonymous attendee, and she's asking, can you speak more about the iris metrics that are part of the application? So maybe let me take that question first, because the iris metric is something new that we're piloting this year in our application form. So in addition to asking for sort of the SDG goals that you're trying to reach with your business, we have also introduced the iris metric framework. And essentially what the iris metric framework is a series of impact measurement metrics that is already defined across various social and environmental issues. And so we thought that this would be one way of helping entrepreneurs who are thinking about the social impact they're creating and how to refine really further their measurement metrics. And so you can visit the Iris Plus website for the various issues, that the Iris theme that you're solving for. And then underneath each theme, there's a series of metrics already that have been validated and created. And you can sort of think about, well, within your business, how this metric would stack up in your work. However, it is according to a set of themes and a set of metrics that has been created. And so to the extent that if your business doesn't fit within any of those themes or the specific metric, we certainly included in the application form a others category that you can basically propose how you have been measuring your impact. So don't feel concerned if your business didn't fit specifically into one of the metric categories or themes, and just feel free to sort of share with us how you have been measuring your impact. Next we have a question for Katell. Katell, what would be your advice to businesses that contribute to the SDG but are not aware of this and not familiar with the UN SDG, and how can they assess their business against the SDG framework and report on their impact?
So I guess I give the same. So for people who are not aware of this, and I can add that also to my PowerPoint. If you want to know more about the goals themselves, I mean, there is a whole set of resources online under what's called the SDG Academy, and you can spend hours and go down the rabbit hole there, just learning and educating yourself about the SDGs from different perspectives. So I'll give the link so that you'll have that. It's a free resource. I've also added a number of, I have a quick interview with one of the SDG architect I worked with when I worked in the UN before in the slides. So you can educate yourself. There is enough material online. And the second part of the question was how to connect your business and report. So I'd say the same, go and play around with this action manager. And just see how it feels compared to the question you can answer about your business. I think that's the best way to see what it looks like, and then that might trigger more questions that will require more education, and that's the way I would go. I mean, a theoretical chat like right now is just so far we can go. So I know I'm not super helpful, but to give you some tools to play around and learn as you go.
Well, thank you, Katell. That is helpful. Okay, our next question is from Natalie, and this is probably going to be our last question. She says that she really valued a brainstorming session around SDG, and she looked at a number of SDG, but honestly wasn't looking broadly enough around supply chain and partnerships to deliver. She loves the point on this and the measurement. What are some simple steps that she can do to break down an SDG to explore the genuine connection between it and the impact? For example, she teaches business skills to Changemaker, and as 85% are women in the sector, this empowers them economically by improving their knowledge and skills in career advancement and employment. How could you measure this in an effective and efficient way that's genuine in terms of impact? And it is just seems that the typical go-to would be I think, social return on investment report, which is in the thousands. So this question is from Natalie. Caitlin, might you have some ideas that you might want to share? I mean, I know in your talk about your measurement of Flair and the example you gave, you gave an example of the number of lives women saved. So might you have any ideas for Natalie?
Yeah, and I'm just thinking off the cuff and not knowing too much about your business, Natalie. But I think some of it is just like what you were saying is reach, like how many women you have, provided training to and skills. But I guess if you could actually show that difference. So when you say career advancement or employment, how do you measure that? So prior to the program, were people employed at 50%, post now they're 70%, so you've improved by 20%, or how do you kind of measure? Knowledge is a little bit trickier to measure, I would say. So I would look at definitely employment, saying that knowledge was like a factor in getting that person a job. Career advancement as well, you could look at that. So we oftentimes look at this. An example in our business, we look at, for example, ambulance teams and their advancement. So there's different levels in paramedicine. And so what percentage of our paramedics go from level 1 to 2? So similarly, you could say, if you're looking at advancement, maybe it's what percentage of women are going from a non-management to management role, or a role that is of kind of greater stature or leadership. So I would just try to break it down. And as I say, start with one woman. Take one person from your program and map them out. Oftentimes by doing that, then you create the kind of overall story. And you're able to somehow see the trends by one person to then be able to look kind of at that 10,000 foot view.
Oh, fantastic, Kilian. That's off the cuff. Wow. You should come do help us with impact measurement at the initiative too. Well, great. Well, I think that's our last question that we can handle today on SDG goals. So thank you very much, Katell and Caitlin, for joining us for this session. I think we have all learned a lot, and I love this exchange on how, the history of the SDG and how it pertains to entrepreneurs, and specifically how it pertains to all the women entrepreneurs at the moment in the world. But from that, I want to thank again both Caitlin and also Katell for your time today. We really appreciate it.